Okay, I got this book here, and here's a part in here, and this is about Earth mounds, uh, and they're present that were present in North America here, and this is what the Indians said about them. This is what the Ojibwa said about them. All right, let me see. Here we go. Wawan Jikwon. The chief of Red Lake Ojibways relates that several years since, while on visit to the earthen wigwams of the Gitchach in Ewug, or Gross Ventures, he was informed by their old men that the smoke of their village once arose in the vicinity of Sandy Lake. They showed him in a piece of bark, which was very correctly marked, the principal streams and lakes of the upper Mississippi, and pointed him out to the site of their former village at the entry of East Savannah River into the St. Louis, where the remains of their earthen lodges, now covered by the forested trees, are still discernible. Groups of these mounds are to be seen on the principal lakes in the upper Mississippi country at Puckwa, Rice Lake, near Sandy Lake, in a group of numbering 70 of these mounds, now covered by a thick grove of maple trees at the mouth of Pine River, which empties into the Mississippi above Crow Wing. There, a group of 19 in which bones have been discovered by Ojibwas. At the Gull Lake, many of these mounds has also been seen by the writer, and at one place there are two standing side by side, each over 100 feet long and 4 feet high. On the top of one of these stands a high pine tree which looks to be centuries old. The numerous mounds on the shores of Mille Lacs are accounted for by in Ojibwe tradition as remains of former earthen lodges of the Dakotas, whom their ancestors drove from this lake. The mounds, which are thickly scattered through the St. Croix and Chippewa River region, and are said by the Ojibways to be the remains of their former wigwams of their old enemies, the Odugamis. In the vicinity of some mounds on the Chippewa River, the writer distinguished gardens, fields regularly laid out, even in which rows of corn and hills were still plainly discernible, clearly proving that the mounds scattered over this portion of country are not of ancient origin, as some speculative writers would have us believe. The old men of the Ojibwe affirm that nearly all tribes of the red man who lived in open prairie country before the introduction of firearm among them were accustomed to living in earthen wigwams as protection and a defense, and defense against attacks of their enemies. Truly, it may be said of all these Indian tribes, their hand has been against every one, and everyone's hand against them, and they have lived in fear and trembling one another. Off sudden midnight attack extinguish forever the fire of their wigwams. And for greater security against these sudden attacks and continual states of warfare, first originated the earthen remains over which now the white man's plow peacefully furrows. From human bones being occasionally discovered in these mounds, most writers have been led to suppose them as graves and burial places of distinguished chiefs. The Indians account for them by saying that these former earthen wigwams were seldom evacuated without a struggle, which generally ended in the massacre of the inmates, and the bones now discovered and buried within them are the remains of these former occupants. Few mounds which have been discovered by human bones regularly deposited in a position facing the west may probably be considered as burial mounds, though this too may be accounted for from the fact of years later the Indians have occasionally buried their dead within these mounds. Though this may not be considered as a prevalent custom, as they treat all the remains of nature with great respect and objects consecrated to the memory of bygone and people of bygone times. The Ojibways assert in behalf of their tribe that they have never been forced to live in earthen wigwams as a defense against their enemies, and none of the mounds which thickly scattered over the country at they present occupy west of Lake Superior originate from or are work of their ancestors. This country in which they have lived for the past 5 centuries is covered with dense forests, plentiful supply of large lakes on the bosom of the lay islands. In times of danger, they could always pitch their wigwams in comparative safety. All right, there's that's just a little history tidbit. Plus, I'm into the giant serpent mound type thing.